Hey, what's up? In this tutorial, I'm going to be walking through the entire Chapter 6 positioning elements, and you can find that in your Maths 240 Learn manual. What I'd like you to do is read through the entire chapter first and have an attempt at following the instructions in the chapter. And if you get stuck, then come back and refer to this video. There's a fair bit to get through in this video. I'll be going through it rather quickly. So when you go through it yourself and you come to an area where you're having some problems, why not come over to this video and fast forward to the section you're having a problem with, and you might want to pause the screen and take a look at the code that I have and see how that correlates to your code. Okay, so let's get into it. The first thing we need to do is create some brand new files. So I'm in my Maths 240 Learn folder. We've got an existing HTML document here and our style sheet. I'm going to duplicate these and rename our new copies of them and use those for this tutorial. So I'm just going to copy our HTML document and rename that as boxes.html. Please take care to make sure that you don't have boxes.html.txt. That is incorrect. That's not going to work. It just needs to be .html. And same again for our styles.css. I'm copying that, I'm pasting that, and I'm going to call that boxes.css, not boxes.css.txt. Once again, that is incorrect. If you're on a Mac, I'm on a Windows machine at the moment. If you're on a Mac, all you have to do is press the Apple key and D to duplicate each file, and then select the file and hit the return key to rename the file. So slightly different on a Mac, not all that hard though. Okay, so let's open up our boxes.html file in our text editor. It would be Text Wrangler if you're on a Mac. I'm on a PC. I'm going to use Notepad++, but you can also use the default Notepad application that comes with Windows. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is delete all the content inside the body tags. So essentially, we have an empty website. You'll notice our body tags are still there. They're just completely empty inside. We also need to change the link to our style sheet. Currently, it's linking to styles.css. Let's change that to boxes.css. And we'll save that. Go back to our files. And let's open up our boxes.css file in our text editor. And let's select everything and just delete it. So essentially, we have an empty style sheet. Back over to our HTML file. Let's create some HTML inside our body tags. I'm going to use the tags header. Oops. Don't forget to close each tag as you create them. And to close them, we use the /. Remember that? So we've got header. I'm going to do a nav tag. And I'm also going to do a section tag. So we've got some containers here, header, nav, and section. There's nothing in them, so if we were to view our website, we actually wouldn't be seeing anything at this stage. But what I will do is save that and jump over to our CSS and actually give those containers some background colors and height so we can actually see something on the page. So in CSS, let's create header, nav, and a section. In header, let's give that a height of 100 pixels. We'll give it a background color. And let's give it a border on the bottom, which will be 5 pixels solid, and it will be white. So if we take a look at our page and open up our boxes.html file in our browser, we see our header has a height of 100 pixels and it has that background color and there should be a border there. It might be a little bit hard to see on this screen. Well, of course, the border color is actually white, so we won't see it at this stage, but as we progress, we will see that. So let's jump back over to our CSS file and let's add some CSS for our nav. And let's give that a height of 40 pixels, and we'll also give that a background color as well. Don't forget to use the colon and semicolon correctly in the right spots. If you mix them around or forget them, it will break the website and you'll be scratching your head trying to figure out what's going on. So it's always good just to double check all your lines and just make sure we've got colons and semicolons in the right spot and that we have opening and closing brackets as well. Let's just take a look at our website, see how our nav is displaying, and we'll refresh the page. There's our nav, that's fantastic. Back to the CSS, let's give our section a background color. And let's make the text in our section, we'll make that white. Now we won't see anything at this stage because our section doesn't actually have any content inside it, and neither does it have a height. So I've just refreshed the page. Sure enough, nothing to see quite yet until we put some content inside our section. Just jumping over to the manual, there's some assets that we need to grab. And if we scroll down, we see this logo here. Let's save that to our images directory in our Maths240 Learn folder. I might just rename this so it says logo.jpg. I can just double check. There's my images directory. Yep, there's our logo. So I want to place our logo inside our header, but rather than do it with HTML, I'm going to use CSS to apply it as a background image. So we have to deal with this part here, which is called header. Let's go background image. And then, of course, the path to the image. I might also set this to not repeat. Oh, missing an E there. There we go. Let's save that and take a look at our website. Great, there's our logo. The next thing I want to do is put a bit of a menu inside our nav. So let's head to the let's head to the HTML file, not CSS. And we're going to put some links inside our nav here. Now the manual actually has those links, so I'll just refer back to the manual. Here we go, it's under this section, navigation menu links. Let's just copy this line of code here and paste that directly in between our nav tags. I might just indent it so it's nice and easy to identify. And the next thing I might do is actually separate it and just put these onto separate lines so it's easier to see that we have 4 links there. Let's save the page, refresh, and sure enough, we have 4 blue links. Why are they blue? That's because by default in HTML, all links are blue and appear with an underline. We'll fix that shortly. The next thing I want to do is go back to our manual, and if we scroll down a bit further, you'll see this big long line of text. I want to copy all that and we'll paste that into our HTML file. I find when I'm copying and pasting big chunks of text, the easiest way to do it is click just before the text, scroll down, find the very end of it, here it is, hold down the Shift key and click, and that will select everything between those 2 clicks. Right click, copy. Let's go to our HTML file and let's paste that inside our section tags. There we go. And I might just select some of that and fix the indentation. There we go. In fact, I might indent it one more, just so it's clearly indented inside those section tags. I'll save that, and let's take a look at the website. Great, so there's that text that even comes with an image. You will notice that our website has this white border going all the way around it. And that's because by default, the body tag has a margin. So let's go to our CSS file and get rid of that margin. Because it's the body tag, the first sort of visual thing of our website, I might put that at the top of our style sheet. And I'll say margin 0. Now let's take a look at the website, see what happens. Great, so that's got rid of that white border. And now let's also change the font for the website because I'm not really liking this Times New Roman font. I want to change it to Calibri. So we'll go back to our style sheet. I'll put that in our body area of our style sheet so that it affects everything inside the body. I'll save that and let's take a look at our website. Great, so now all our text is appearing in Calibri. Now the content area, which is all wrapped in our section tags, I want to give that a fixed width of 1000 pixels. So let's jump back over to the style sheet. In section, I'll say width 1000 pixels. Save that. There we go. So our section is now 1000 pixels. I think I might center it. So I'll just jump back to the style sheet and let's use margin auto. So what auto does is automatically calculates the distance or the dimensions for the left and right margins and centers it. And it's relative to the width determined in our style sheet as well. So I'll just save that. Back to our website. Sure enough, our content is now centered. I might get rid of this white background here and jump back to the style sheet. In our body area, let's apply a background color. Save that. Great, that worked. And let's tidy up the text. In our section, you'll see that our text is aligned nicely on the left edge. It's a little bit all over the place on the right edge. I might justify it so it's nicely spaced so that it reaches both the left edge and the right edge. So let's go back to the style sheet and we'll make sure we're dealing with this area section, and we'll do text justify, text dash align rather, justify. Let's take a look and see how that affects our text. Great, so text is nicely aligned on the left edge and also nicely aligned on the right edge. Essentially, it's spaced out all the characters and spacing so that it reaches both edges very nicely. The next thing I want to do is float our image so that it appears alongside our text. Now floats can accept left, right, or no float, or none. So what I might do is actually give our image a class name so that the CSS rule for float, when we apply it, only affects this one image and no other images that we might later on put into our website. So firstly, let's give our image a class name. We'll head over to our HTML. Let's find the image. Here it is here. And let's give that the class info box. Oops, I'm mixing up my CSS and my HTML there. I was using CSS syntax. Of course, with HTML, it should be like this. Notice I've got a capital B there as well. So when I use this class name in my CSS, I'll need to make sure that I'm consistent with my capitalization. So our image now has a class name, class box. Let's jump over to our CSS. And let's add that class. Of course, for classes, we make sure we start with a full stop. I'll put the capital B in there just to make it consistent. And let's say float right. Let's save that and take a look at our website. Great, so our image is now floating to the right. Let's add some margin around our image because you can see our text is kind of tightly up against our image, making our text a little bit hard to read. So I think a margin would fix that. Back to our CSS file, let's say margin of 30 pixels. We'll save that. Great, so that's better. We have a nice margin around our image. Now we can essentially float anything on the page. It could be headings, paragraphs, lists, really pretty much anything. So you aren't really constrained to just floating images. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is go back to our manual, and there's a little bit more text that we need to grab. Here it is here. Let's just copy this whole bit of code. I've just copied that. And we'll go to our HTML file. And I want to make sure that I post this inside the section as our closing section tag. So I'll just put it after all that other stuff. There we go. So essentially we've got a div inside our section. Now what's a div? A div is basically a container that we can put things in. It's a block element container, so it by default will span 100% width of its parent container, in this case it's section, but we can apply some CSS to it and give it its own dimensions. I might just fix up my indentation that's gone a little bit out of whack there, only because I prefer to kind of visualize in my code. Oh, there we go, I'll just leave it as that. And in our CSS, we can apply some styling to this div, which has a class, text box. Let's just jump back over to the manual. Here we go, there's some CSS that we can use. I'll just copy that. Back over to our CSS file. So essentially, here's a bunch of CSS that will only affect anything with that class name text box. And sure enough, our div has that class name text box. So let's save that and take a look at our website and see what happens. Yes, okay, so there's a box. It's got a border. It even has a bit of a rounded corner. Looks like it has some padding there. And it's got a width, and it also seems to be floating to the right of our content area. Let's just double check all that in CSS. Text box, yep, has a float right. We have a width of 400. It's got its own background color. We've got some padding of 20 pixels, a 5 pixel border. And here's that rounded border radius, and the radius is 8 pixels. And it's got a margin left of 20 pixels. We can also use negative values for our margins. So I might just create a negative value here. Let's see, margin dash right, negative 100 pixels. And let's take a look at our website and see what happens. Well, you can see our box here has a negative margin of 100 pixels on the right edge. Just to demonstrate the difference, I might make that a positive value just by getting rid of the negative sign there. We'll save that. Take a look at our page. Now it was the margin on the right edge, so sure enough, it now has a 100 pixel margin on the right edge. Just to be consistent with what it says in the manual, I'll return that to a negative 100 pixel margin on the right. The next thing I want to do is grab all our content and let's put it inside a new div which will have the class name wrapper. So let's go to our HTML, and it's in fact, I want to put everything in that div. So everything that's currently inside our body tags will live inside this new div. So let's add a new div. I'll put this at the top of all our content, so it's the first thing we see once we open up the body tags. Here's a div. I'll close that div. And let's give our div a class name. And let's call it wrapper. Great, so I now want to select everything else and we'll insert it inside our div here. So I'm just clicking at the start there, scrolling down, finding the end of all our content just before the section tag closes. There it is, holding down the Shift key and clicking. So it's selected everything between my two clicks, and I'll now cut that and paste that into our div area here. Great, so that's all inside its own div called wrapper. Let's jump over to the CSS and apply some styles to wrapper. Of course, wrapper was the class name, so I've used a full stop. Let's say float left and margin 0. So when I refresh the page, we should be seeing our content floating to the left. Yep, sure enough, there it is. Likewise, we could have said float right. See what happens. Our entire content is floating to the right. Even this box, which is kind of breaking outside of the div, because remember we gave that a negative 100 pixel margin. But I actually think rather than floating it left or right, I'm going to say float none, and let's center it using margin auto. Great, so basically we've picked up everything and we've centered it. I might say, let's say wrapper, we'll give that a fixed width of 1000 pixels. Whoops. That was the one piece that I had forgotten to do. 1000 pixels wide, so our wrapper, that div with the class name wrapper, should now be 1000 pixels wide. We've saved that. Let's take a look and see what happens. Oh, there we go, much better. So everything, all our content, everything, the heading, our nav, nicely wrapped inside that div that's 1000 pixels wide. Of course, this box, once again, because it has that negative 100 margin on the right, that's kind of breaking outside of the container, but that's intentional. And I think that's pretty much it. We've reached the end of our tutorial there. So thank you for watching. And in some of the following tutorials, we'll start modifying this page even further.